Darren, thanks for joining us here at Adidas's HQ in Germany. How good is it for Newcastle to be invited here?
Oh, it's brilliant. Obviously, Eddie and the players are loving it. I mean, this is Adidas headquarters. It's the sort of base camp that Germany have used in preparation for major tournaments. And for us, in that first week of sort of pre-season, it's a perfect base because everyone's self-contained. Obviously, got great training facilities. Adidas have been brilliant in terms of looking after us. And I think, what better way for us to launch the start of pre-season, but also the start of our partnership with Adidas. It's been superb.
It is the launch of pre-season, but it feels like it's already been quite a busy summer, certainly in terms of the flurry of transfer activity at the end of last month. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a new phenomenon now in football where we have this sort of PSR deadline. As we've always spoken about, we want to be compliant from a PSR perspective. The good news is we are compliant now, and the way that PSR works is we've now got basically a new cycle that kicks into play. So we had a couple of years where we were 70 million in losses, so that meant that it was quite tight for us at the end of this financial year to 30th of June. But now we lose one of those years with the 70 million, so that good news for the supporters and for the club is that looking forwards now, we've got a new cycle and we've got new revenues coming online. So things like Adidas, the fact that we have that partnership, we have the merchandise that we get from Adidas, St James's Stack is going to open in time for the new season. So all of those factors help us. But what it did mean was we were in a situation where there were certain trades that we had to do, and one of the unintended consequences of the PSR regime that no one foresaw, I think, when it was brought in was you're incentivized to move those players that are homegrown or have a low net book value. So, Elliot Anderson is an example of a player homegrown player, that we love, but in the end it was the right deal for us to do at that time, and we wish him the best at Nottingham Forest. The same with Yankuba Minte, who's going on to Brighton. But for us, for where we were, those were the deals that made the most sense.
Yeah, two players left. A player came in, but ultimately you got to keep a lot of really important players as well.
Yeah, so obviously we kept the core of our sort of our older players, I'd say. Also as well, Lloyd Kelly coming in. Obviously Lewis Hall was made permanent, so bringing in those new additions. And now I think it's an interesting time we live in, because I think back to my experience in America where we had a salary cap, a very strict salary cap, and almost now under financial fair play, in effect, it's like a salary cap. So what that means is every single decision you make has ramifications. So we have to be as efficient and effective as we can on all decisions. And that might be contract extensions, that might be trading players out, that might be bringing players in on loan. All of those factors have a laddering effect. So I think, going forwards now, I spoke about it being a new cycle, but every decision's still got to be circumspect, made carefully. And I think that's the difference now. It's gone from the days of it being about what the wealth of a particular ownership is, because as we know with our ownership, we will spend to the maximum we can under the available headroom. It's more about how do you efficiently spend those resources.
With that in mind then, there's still a long way to go of this transfer window. What can fans expect from it?
Well, look, I think from our perspective, we're excited about the season ahead. We think we've got the core of a really good squad going into that season, but we're always looking to strengthen. I think we'll always try to do that within our means. I think we'll be looking. We've obviously got Paul Mitchell coming on as our sporting director, who's just joined us. So with him and Eddie, that will be what they'll be looking at, is are there areas we can improve and strengthen our squad within the headroom that we've got. And so, as you say, we've still got a couple of months left in the window, and we'll always be looking and striving to see what we can do. How can we be innovative? How can we be thinking outside the box to strengthen the squad?
And the club's commercial revenue, it's clearly improved a lot over the last couple of years, but is there more in the pipeline? What can you tell us about those sort of movements?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's quite incredible when you look back at, takeover 140 million was the last sort of accounts in terms of revenue. Went from 140 to 180 to 250. This coming season that's just finished will be north of 300. So that's an annual compound growth rate of over 30% year on year, which is phenomenal. And I think, that just goes to the great work that ownership did right from the very start in terms of, building this club and showing the sort of the headroom, and what we all know, it's a special club with great potential. And we're seeing that now with our partners. I think with Seller, our front of shirt, our fans will have seen some of the amazing activations. So, we're seeing that our partners are activating. Obviously, Adidas has come on board, which we're really excited about. And we've got a number of, companies in the background that are seeing this, that are in our pipeline, that we'll hopefully be announcing in the coming months.
News broke at the end of last week that Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Guddusi would be stepping away after almost 3 years. What can you say about what they achieved at Newcastle United?
Well, I think we saw it with the fan reaction. I mean, Amanda and Mehrdad were there in terms of bringing the ownership group together and having the takeover take place. And I think the tenacity that they showed in terms of that long journey, because it wasn't just as everyone knows, it wasn't a week, it wasn't a month, it was years in the making in terms of that happening. And then the work they've done in putting together the foundations for the club on the long term. They'll always be our fans and the club will always be thankful to Amanda and Mehrdad. And I'm excited to see their forces of nature, as everyone knows, and exciting to see what they do next in terms of business opportunities.
You mentioned earlier about Paul Mitchell coming in as the new sporting director. What made him stand out, and what do you think he can bring to the role to really move the club forward and move with the club's ambitions?
Yeah, we were really excited to bring Paul on board, and I think firstly he's one of the top sporting directors in the world. But I think and in discussing this in terms of with ownership and with Eddie of what we really were focusing on in our sporting director, I think Paul brings exactly what we needed. So really strong in recruitment, so a background that came up through the recruitment ranks. The fact that he obviously knows the Premier League from his time at Southampton and Tottenham, but also he's got that more global vision as well, because he's worked with Monaco, so in France, but also with Red Bull, so not only Leipzig, but he was doing the global technical director role at one stage, so club in Brazil, club in America. So I think that sort of all-around view of the role, it was something that really attracted us. But ultimately, and we've spoken about this, recruitment is the biggest aspect of that sporting director role, and it was really important for us, that partnership between Eddie and Paul, in terms of getting us, and I've spoken about it already, it's about how do we use our resources to get the best tools for Eddie to put out on the pitch, and that's what they'll be working together over the coming years in terms of us doing that from window to window to strengthen and improve the squad.
And following on from that as well, you've brought in James Bunce as performance director. Why was that such a key appointment?
That was really important. I mean, look, I think we've seen last season in terms of some of the injury issues that we had, and this was a role that we discussed before the change in sporting director with Eddie, of having somebody as a performance director so they could oversee medical and sports science. So an innovative role. It's increasingly, I think, going to come into play at clubs around the globe, but we felt that this was an important person for us to get. So then to be able to get somebody that, from Paul's perspective, he'd worked with in Monaco, that's got that breadth and experience in this specific role, is really important to us. And we go into this season, hoping that from our perspective now, we can get more of our players out on the pitch, with more availability. Because again, when we look at how do we sort of punch above our weight, how do we get to where we want to get to as quick as we can, we also, one of those factors is, can we get the best out of the squad we've got in terms of availability? So this was a really important hire, and we're really delighted to have got James here ready to start for pre-season as well.
And with all that in place now, finally, Darren, really, what are the ambitions, what are the hopes for the season ahead?
Well, look, I think it's exciting. It's that time of year, isn't it, where we've got the hope, and we're thinking about, okay, disappointed that we didn't get into Europe when we were so close, and we're a bit unfortunate. I think we're the only club that's finished 7th in the last 10 years that didn't make Europe. But on the positive side, and the glass being half full, we've got a chance now to focus on that Saturday to Saturday, where we don't have a distraction of Europe, and really give it a go in the Premier League. And we want to be competing in tournaments. I mean, last season we got to the quarterfinals of both the FA Cup and the League Cup. First time we've done that in over 20 years. So we want to be competitive, we want to be competing for trophies. But I think for us and where we are on our journey, trying to make Europe, we expect to really be in Europe, and I think that's got to be the aim for us as a club next season, that we're qualifying for Europe.